So many details. Hello fellow Hunters of the Blue, and welcome to my channel, and also welcome to another episode of Heavy Contrast. Heavy Contrast is a series where I try to paint one miniature to the highest standard possible using just contrast paints and highlights. And for this episode I have a real treat because I'm painting my second Phoenix Lord, Drazhar, or Arhra if you want to call it by his real name. So, let's get cracking. So as you can see, we're starting from a base coat of Mechanical Standard Grey, except for his head, which I prime with Corax White. And I will just paint the parts that will be black using Mechanical Standard Grey base paint before applying our next step. And that next step is to apply a layer of Black Templar over all the parts that will be black armor. And well, that's basically all of him. As always, I'm going section by section. I will be careful not to touch too much of the stones, which I will be painting later on with other colors over Mechanicus, so the less work I have to do then, the better. If you want to see a full explanation of how I apply contrast to get the smoothest result possible, I will leave that video link in the top right corner. With the Black Templar now almost dry, I'm going to start edge highlighting his armor, and he has a lot of edges here, so you have to be patient. What I will do is do a chunky edge highlight using Thunderhawk Blue. And when I say chunky, for most of you this is going to be thin, but the key here is to make the thinnest edge highlight you can with Thunderhawk Blue. That still allows you to do a thinner edge highlight later on with the next highlight color. The thinner you can make this edge highlight, the better the armor will look later on. Please allow me not to do the edge highlights on the whole model before I move on, because otherwise I will be here for an eternity. And let me do the next step. For the next step I'm going to take Administratum Grey, and I will do now just the very thinnest edge highlight I can possibly make. With that highlight done, I'm going to move into the third highlight. This will be Ulthuan Grey, and the idea here is to do the same thin edge highlight as we did with Administratum, but this time concentrating it towards the corners of the armor. And with that highlight done, you may be wondering to yourself, but that doesn't look like the color of his armor. And you are right, actually, this really doesn't look like the color of his armor. But we are going to solve that now. You see, what we did here is value sketching the armor before we tint it with the appropriate color, and this will be a mix of 1 part Pterodon Turquoise and 2 parts Contrast Medium. And I'm not going to apply this as a normal contrast layer. What I will do now is just apply a super thin layer of this over the whole armor. I might need to apply 2 coats, depending on how I see this going, but I will start with 1 and then judge once this is dry. The second layer of Pterodon Turquoise is now dry, and this is looking pretty good. I'm really happy with it, and I'm going to just finish it by reapplying some highlights on some areas. For this I'm going to use Gauss Blaster Green. I'm going to just focus on the very corners, again doing the smallest edge highlight I can. what I'm doing is basically making a slightly smaller edge highlight than we did with Ulthuan Grey here, because the Ulthuan Grey is slightly darker than this once the two layers applied over it. So I'm just adding a bit more light and a bit more tonal variation and depth. All the armor is now finished, including the head and both arms, and it's now time to paint the gold bits of the armor, and for this I'm going to try something different and use Runelord Brass to start with. This is the new Runelord Brass, the base version of the paint. All the gold is now base coated, and I'm going to highlight it before applying contrast using a 1-to-1 mix of Stonehold Silver and Runelord Brass. You can also use Canoptic Alloy for this, but I'm trying to save on how many paints I use, not that it means a lot. Just going to apply a volumetric highlight here. As you can see, I'm feathering the edges as I apply this, but you can just glaze it if you want. And with the gold now highlighted, I'm going to apply contrast over it, and this is Agaros Dunes. What a pleasure it is for me to introduce today's video sponsor. Not only a fellow YouTuber, but one of the best, Miniac. Scott is launching a new and amazing Kickstarter campaign composed of 3 beautiful 75mm models. They are elves, so that helps quite a bit, accompanied by 3 absolutely incredible painting masterclasses by Scott himself. Painting the Ranger, with a class focused on coming up with color skips and fixing mistakes. John Ninas painting the Warrior, with an introduction to painting 75mm minis for painters new to this scale. And the beast that is Benjamin Cantor painting the Witch, and a class focused on light, shadows and color theory. Along with this incredible set of minis, you can also get an amazing brush coffin. It is a fully metal brush box that can store more than 12 brushes and any other similar shaped hobby tools inside its high density foam interior. Each box comes with 2 trays, featuring one just for brushes and another tray that has a multi-purpose slot. The last time Scott developed a miniature, he got a lot of feedback not only on the model, but also on the masterclass he developed for it, and it's implemented that feedback. Not only were 32mm models requested, but also 3D STL files of those models. Scott is hoping to be able to bring those 3D files and smaller scale minis to backers in the form of additional stretch goals, so people can enjoy these great concepts in whatever form factor they prefer. There are more exciting stretch goals still yet to discover, and other add-ons like lovely wooden planes fit for your Wood Elf dioramas. The campaign runs from February 25th to March 21st, but if you miss that window, you can always late pledge through the Pledge Manager. Thank you, Scott, for sponsoring this video, and you, don't miss this opportunity to get these incredible naughty Wood Elves minis. The first layer of Agaros Dunes is mostly dry, and I'm going to reinforce the shadows a bit with more Agaros Dunes. What I will do is apply Agaros Dunes, clean my brush and feather out the rest. With that extra shading now done, I'm going to re-highlight it using a 1-to-1 mix of Retributor Armor and Stonehold Silver. With that highlight done, I'm going to move into the last highlight for the gold details. This will be pure Stonehold Silver, and I will just do the thinnest edge highlight I can with this color. The gold is now finished, and as you can see, I have base coated using Corax White all the little details that will be non-metallic, and I'm going to start with this red tassels on the back, and for this I'm going to use a 1-to-1 mix of Lustrous Red and Blood Angels Red. This is my favorite red mix with contrast paints. With the red now base coated, it's time to base coat all the purple details, and for this I'm going to use my new favorite discovery. This is 4 parts Volupus Pink and 1 part Drazhar Blue. And look what a lovely saturated and beautiful purple we get with this. And finally, I will just take Drazhar Blue and I will paint the remaining gems with this. There are a couple of exceptions, which are green gems, but I will touch on them later. For now, I'm just going to concentrate on the ones that are on his body. I will let this dry and I will probably do a second coat of Drazhar Blue. So we ended up doing 2 layers of this lovely purple mix onto all of the purple parts because I wanted a more saturated look. And for the first highlight I'm going to use Cacophony Purple, and I want to make an edge highlight with this as usual. But I'm also going to glaze this onto the top surfaces. This is the glaze consistency I'm using. With that highlight done, I'm going to move into the Chala Lilac. The idea is just to make a smaller edge highlight than we did with Cacophony Purple, so more focused towards the edges and tops of the folds. I've highlighted the gems in the exact same way, and I'm going to do a final highlight but just on the gems. This will be with Thuan Grey, and I will try to catch the very corners of each of the cracks. This will give it the appearance of broken glass or crystal. I'm now going to paint the red details, starting with these tassels here, and just for them and the hair and not for the gems, I'm going to start with Wild Red Red. With that highlight done, I'm going to move into Fire Dragon Bright, and I will apply this both on the tassels and the hair and on the gems. Here in tassels I'm just focusing it towards the tips and maybe a bit here on the curves. And on the gems I'm just going to make a very thin edge highlight along all of the cracks. And at this point is where the red on the tassels and the hair and the red from the gems deviates. And I will finish the gems first using again Ulthuan Grey, and I will pick up again the corners of each gem. And to finish off the tassels, I'm going to use Lugganath Orange, just picking up the very ends with as thin a line as I can make. With all that done, we have a lot of the details now covered, but we have to still paint all the black details and the blue gems, and I'm going to start with the black. And for this, what I did is repaint them all with Mechanicus Thunder Grey and then do Black Templar all over them, as I did with the swords at the beginning of the video, but as these were tinted afterwards with the Terraton Turquoise, I had to reapply it over them. So just to make it all clean and nice, I just did that quick layer. And our first highlight will be Mechanicus Thunder Grey. And starting with the ropes, I'm just going to do a thin edge highlight here. And for the swords, what I will do is a thick edge highlight, the chunky edge highlight using Mechanicus Thunder Grey. Remember, the key here is to make an edge highlight that you know you can make smaller later on. I'm not going to highlight the runes, those will be glowing, so I can skip them. With the highlight of Mechanicus done, I'm going to move into Administratum Grey, and I will just do a very small highlight here on the ropes. And the thinnest edge highlight I can on the sword. And to finish the black off just on the swords, I'm going to do a very small highlight using Ulthuan Grey on the corners of the sword. With the black now finished, it's time to do the blue gems, and for this I'm going to start with a mix of 1 part Thanasar Blue and 1 part Ulthuan Grey, and I'm going to do the first highlight. And I'm going to take pure Ulthuan Grey and do the same dots that I've been doing in the other gems. With all that done, there is only one big detail left, that is all the steel bits. That includes these blades on his backpack, details like the rings that he has around the tassels, and also all of the spikes. And he has a lot of spikes, so just go around picking them up. Very careful not to mess up anything. With all the steel now base coated, I'm going to shade it, and for this I'm just going to use Black Templar. Straight out of the pot, I'm just going to apply it to the back section of each blade, and I'm going to feather it out. I will have to do this in several stages to build up the color. For these smaller blades here on his knee pads, I'm just going to apply Black Templar towards the part where it meets the gold. The highlight afterwards will make the rest. For these small spikes I'm not going to do anything, but for the larger spikes I'm going to apply black temper just at the bottom. With all the shading done, I end up doing about 3-4 layers maybe, each one taking less and less space. I'm going to highlight all the metal, and for this I'm going back to iron hand steel just for the blades here. I'm just going to do a very thin edge highlight here. Pretty easy to do because you can just use the side of your brush for the main highlights. And for the next set of highlights on the metal, I will apply this all over. This will be Iron Breaker. So I'm just going to pick all the edges of the blades. I'm trying to be as small a highlight as possible here. I will pick up all the raised bits of the spikes. And for the final highlight on the metallic details, this will be just the blades. I'm going to apply Stonehouse Silver just at the very tips. Small dot. The final step here on the arms, before I finish them and I set them apart, waiting for the last bit of the paint job, is to paint the inside of the runes with white. And my suggestion is to thin the white into a sort of a wash consistency. And you may need to do a couple passes here. Also, picking up a thin brush helps. Once this dries, I will do as many layers as I need to get a solid white on the inside of the runes. With the body and the swords mostly finished, it's time to tackle the head. And I'm going to start with the horns because they have potential to be messy around the mask, and I want the mask to be white. So I will do them first, and if I have to correct, I will do so. And for the horns I'm going to start with a skeleton horn. Remember, all the surfaces were cleaned up using Corax White, and the head was primed in Corax White to begin with. With our first layer of skeleton horn now dry, I'm going to make a glaze using wildwood medium. You can use whatever medium, you can use contrast medium or Lamia medium, both work very well for this. I just had contrast medium on my table, so that's what I'm going to use. And I'm going to thin my wildwood to this sort of consistency. You see, it has to be very transparent. And I'm going to apply layers of this towards the top of the horns. This is going to take a while, but if you want a smooth result, this is the best way. And we want to build this until we have pure wildwood up to sort of here, like the upper third of the horns. You can also apply this and feather it out, but I find that using glazing here works best because it will maintain the highlights better on the ridges of the horns. Just with the second layer, you can start to see the difference between one horn that just has one and one has two. So this will build up faster than you expect. The glazing with wildwood is now done, and look how smooth and how beautiful it looks. And this was about 7 or 8 layers. I didn't really count, but it was about that. Now I'm going to finish the horns by doing the same but with Black Templar just on the very ends. Again, this is the consistency of the Black Templar. A little bit more heavy because, well, this is pretty dark and it's not going to really show tide marks. And it's just going to pick up the very end, so we have it pure black. I'm guessing a couple layers of this will be more than enough. It's now time to highlight the horns, and for this I'm going to use palette with flesh. I have it thinned down to this sort of consistency here so it runs nicely. I will use this consistency for the bottom part here, where I will be picking up basically almost the whole of the ridge here. And the more upwards I go, the less highlight I'm going to do. And here at the very top, I'm going to thin it down a little bit more, sort of like this. And I'm going to just do a very thin line of this over the black and everything. As it's so transparent, it's not really going to look very jarring, and we can insist more to create more highlights. And then for the final highlight on the horn, I'm going to use pure white. I will use this just on the bottom of the horn. I'm basically going to edge highlight these lighter sections here. Again, the more I move upwards, the less I do, until I'm just doing small dots. And maybe a very small dot here at the very top. With the horns now finished, it's time to tackle the mask. And for this I'm going back to my mix of 4 part Polypus pink and 1 part Tassel blue, but I'm going to thin it down into a glaze consistency. I'm using contrast medium here, again just because I have it available at my desk. I'm going to apply this as a glaze, focusing towards the part that you can see on the box art, so under his cheek, in the ears, and towards the back of the head. It's a bit tricky to get to, that's why I suggest you don't glue this. Again, very important, you move the brush in the direction you want the shadows to be, so where you end the brush stroke, more paint will deposit there, so move the brush in that direction. Leave this to dry and apply as many layers as you need to. You can also put a bit more of the shade here undiluted into the bent holes here on the side of this mask. The shading is now done on the mask, and as you can see I pushed it a lot on the bend and on the ears, and much softer around the back of the mask. And for the first highlighting, going back to Corax White, which was the base coat here, and I am going to apply an edge highlight towards the back of the mask here. And also here around the bends. And to finish off the mask, except for the glow of course, I'm going to use pure white and I'm going to do the final edge highlight. And with that highlight done, we are rewarded with this. After several days of very hard work, we finally have Drazhar all built up and ready to be finished. And the only detail left are the green glowing details and the green gems, which I'll also be doing as if they were glowing. And for this I'm going to use a 1-to-1 mix of Warp Lightning and Tesseract Glow. And for the runes here on the swords, I'm just going to apply this inside of them. You can go over the edge a little bit, it will only help to simulate the glow here. And once I'm done, I will go back and absorb any excess. It's easier to overfill and then remove. Going to do the same over the gems. And also into the eyes and the recess here. You have to be a bit more careful here. Now I'm going to take the same mix of Warp Lightning and Tesseract Glow and turning it into a glaze, very thin glaze, as you can see here. And I'm going to apply this glaze around the eye, just tinting the highlights here around the glowing detail. And you can also use this same glaze to tint a little bit here, for example, around the areas that would have some light, some green glow hitting them. Highlight that glowing details a little bit more just to give them a bit more punch. And for this I'm going to use a 1-to-1 mix of tone yellow and mood green. I'm just going to pick up the eyes, for example, and the center of the gems here. After that highlight done, I'm going to move into pure dawn yellow, and again just going to pick up the center here but taking less area. And now I'm going to move into pure white to punch that glow to the maximum level. A small dot here on the eyes and on the center of the gems here. And now with pure white I can pick up just the very edge here at some corners. And now to finish everything off, I'm going to take Drazhar Glow and I'm going to thin it down into a glazed consistency. I'm just using water here, you don't need anything else. And I'm going to apply a very thin glaze of this over the bright spots, just to tint them this greenish glow. And I can drop some of this undiluted into some of the runes here, just picking some of the corners and stuff like that. And with that last step done and the base painted, you can see the rim is still drying. Drazhar is finally done. This took a hell of a lot of time. This mini has so many details, but I think it's worth it in the end because it looks amazing. So guys, I really hope you enjoyed this one and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye! Do you like my videos and want to help me make them? Well, there are several ways you can do that. You can follow me on social media. I have the links to all my social media in the description below. You can also check all my affiliate links in the pinned comment of this video. Use those links in your next hobby purchase and help me without any additional cost to you. I finally have a link for the brushes that I use down there. Don't forget to check the merch that you can see just below this video in the shop tab of my channel. But most importantly, there is Patreon and channel members. I have the link to my Patreon in the description below and the pinned comment of the video. Or if you prefer, you can just click the join button below this video. Patreon and channel members help me do all the cool projects that I want to make and help me improve the quality of my videos. Don't be afraid. No content will ever be hidden behind a paywall, but it's a nice way to help me and you will get something back for your generosity. As I said guys, thank you very much for watching and a special thank you to Heather Armstead, Nicholas Forner, Brian Bledsoe, Gringar, LMAP Limited, Tyrannosaur, Carlos Rivera, Chris Gothenthal, Christoph Moret, Javi Mota, Kim Anderson, Michael Boye, Robert Smith, Thomas Usterka, Tom Brand, Victor Domen, Dark Havok, Aaron Dell, Charles Armintas, Chris Broga, Chris Fivey, Kieran O'Murtha, Chris Talios, Dan Mako, Darcy Farrar, David Sutherland, Dr. V, Gareth Smith, Geoffrey Dell, G-Force, Green Rollins, Jack Scoten, Jamie Millikan, Job Simpson, JT Butler, Kevin Mian, Kevin Sulars, Donald Lindemann, Liam Clancy, Mark Baker, Mark Jarvis, Natius Maximus, Nick DeMao, One Brass Took Better, Oscar Jonathan Thomberg, Roger Nilsson, Samuel Sasha Park, and Dusted for being the coolest persons in the planet. Be like these fine folks on my Patreon and take control.